Give me an idea of your background, where you grew up, and ultimately what led you to law enforcement.
So I was born and raised in the Bronx, the Throgs Neck section, Irish and Italian Catholic neighborhood. I knew by about the age of 5 I wanted to be a New York City police officer. There was a snowstorm, and my grandfather was out and he broke his leg, and two policemen brought him home in this snowstorm. And I was a little boy, and I remember these cops were giants. They carried my grandfather into the house. They had these blue uniforms with the buttons, and they got that gun hanging on the hip. And like, who are these guys? What do they eat? Where do they come from? A couple of years later, my mother's taken me to Saturday matinees. There was a movie theater on Tremont Avenue called the Interborough. And right around the corner from the Interborough was the 45th police station or precinct. And I remember being more impressed by walking by the police station than Herbie the Love Bug. So I would run up to the police cars and look in the window, look at the equipment. I would watch the cops coming out of the station house. And again, every little boy is fascinated with that gun. I was amazed at like the way they interacted and the way they'd lean on their gun. And I said, that's what I want to do. And then there was a heavy influence on television. Adam 12, The French Connection, The Seven Ups, all these cop movies, TV shows later on, Hill Street Blues. So I knew what I wanted to do. By age 10 or 12, my friends and I, we would sneak into the local post office and steal FBI wanted posters and then go around the neighborhood conducting manhunts. So, picture a bunch like Little Rascals, a bunch of little boys walking into a deli, and there's some poor construction worker waiting for his Italian combo. And you got a bunch of little boys looking at him like he looks like this guy that's wanted for a bank robbery, interstate flight out of Louisiana. We're lucky we didn't get our asses kicked. So I knew what I wanted to do. My parents wanted me to go to college. I would have none of it. And they didn't really understand SATs. They both worked. And so I got out of high school by the skin of my teeth. I went to Catholic high school. That was probably the best thing in the world for me. I know you had another auto crime detective, John Stiasti, on, and I needed the discipline. I was a wild kid. I was a smart ass. I remember I went to public school for the first 8 grades, and I remember my father saying, "You're going to Catholic high school next year." And I'm like, "What? We don't even go to mass." And he goes, "You're a clown, and if I send you to public school, you're going to be a bigger clown." He said, "So pick a high school run by the men in black." So I did. I went to a Catholic high school for 4 years. Absolutely, it was the best thing in the world for me. And the high school I went to was like a cop factory. So picture this: my graduating year, out of 250 boys, it was an old boys school, 40 became NYPD members. The year before that, there were 50. The year after that, there were 60. So it's like the way Penn State produced NFL linebackers, or LSU now produces wide receivers. St. Raymond's High School for boys produced cops and firemen.
Wow. So tell me, your father's Irish, your mother's Italian. What do they do? What are they doing for a living?
My dad was a butcher. Um, he worked out in a wholesale meat place in Queens, and he used to bring me to work with him. And I was a little boy, and this is before OSHA regulations, and he would bring me to work on Sundays, and I was making chopped meat and sausage, and what I didn't realize was this place was owned by organized crime. My father wasn't a mobster; he was Irish, but he needed a job and he worked there. So I remember one day my father sent me up to the second floor to get something. And as I'm going up these concrete steps, a man comes tumbling down the steps and almost crashes into me. And I'm looking at the bottom of the stairs, and the guy looked like he had Parkinson's, like his hands were all busted up. And he's like, "Help me, help me." These two big Italian guys are laughing, and they're coming down the stairs, and they're like, "Oh, Vic, don't worry about him. He's an old friend of ours." And I'm like, "Friend? What were these guys doing to an enemy?" And the guy is like, "Help me, help me." They pick the guy up, they drag him down the stairs, and I watch, and they threw him out in the street where the garbage was. So my dad's trimming steaks. I go downstairs. I'm like, "Dad, Vito and Anthony just kicked the shit out of some guy and tossed him in the street." My father goes, "All right, just keep working. I'll find out what's going on." Okay, he didn't really seem to upset him. So on the way home, I bring it up again. And my father goes, "Vic, some people just don't learn." And I says, "Learn what?" And he says, "That guy's a shoplifter." He goes, "Last year he tried to steal a couple of steaks. They smacked him around. They told him, 'Don't come around here no more.'" Today, they catch him with a slab of ribs down his pants. So they brought him upstairs. They tuned him up a little bit. He got a little belligerent. They put his hands in a vice. They broke his fingers and they threw him out of the store. I was like, oh. And that was the last day I worked with my father. He goes, you're getting a little bit older. You're starting to see things. I don't want you around this. I don't want you to be a butcher. I want you to go to school. And I was devastated because those Sundays meant a lot to me. And, I kind of got that taken away from me. So I went from that to McDonald's a couple of years later, which you can't compare.
Yeah. How about your mom?
My mom was a housewife pretty much my childhood until my brother and I were, latchkey kids. We were on our own, doing our own thing. Then she started working in like the local bank and bookkeeping.
Mm. Growing up at the time with your brother, how is New York? Safe at the time?
My neighborhood policed itself. I always used to say the neighborhood was Irish, Italian, and a little bit of the mob sprinkled in. So people didn't really go to the cops when there was a problem. You would go to like the local warlord if there was a problem. The cops were there, but they were kind of doing their own thing. But New York City in the 70s and 80s was a bad place. I mean, New York almost went into bankruptcy. There was a lot of crime. But my neighborhood kind of policed itself. It was somewhat safe. Now, I remember as a kid getting on the subway, during the Christmas holidays with my mother to go shopping or to catch a show. And like, that was a different world. I remember driving through the South Bronx once a week, taking the Cross Bronx Expressway out to Jersey where my father had two sisters. Like, wow, like South Bronx, like this is like abandoned buildings. Like this isn't where we live. So where I lived was fine, but once you kind of stepped out, you were in another world.
Yeah. What'd your brother end up doing?
My younger brother, he'd be a good interview. My younger brother, he was a correction officer. He worked on Rikers Island for 5 years, and then he kind of followed me into the New York City Police Department.
Okay. Just one brother?
Yeah.
Okay. At what point, you want to be NYPD the whole time?
Oh, yeah.
When do you start applying?
So you had to be 20 years old, I think, to be eligible to take the test and be hired. I signed up for the test about 20, and then 21, I went into the police academy.
Okay, so you get hired right away then.
Yeah, it didn't take much time from the time. I remember, I think I got like the letter to begin the process in like February, and then I went into the police academy in July of '87.